Marissa Mayer has been in the news ever since she was appointed Yahoo CEO in July last year when she was 5 months pregnant. Initial jubilation gave way to a heated debate on work-life balance when she announced that she'd work right through her pregnancy. One camp said it's her individual choice and the other believed because there are so few women leaders, anything they do sets a precedent. Was she making other pregnant working women look bad? The furor died a natural death but resurfaced a few weeks back when Mayer was back in the news for banning work from home for all Yahoo employees. As head of a company trying to reinvent itself, Mayer felt it was time for all hands on deck.
So whether she likes it or not, this Women's Day, Marissa Mayer has given the corporate world a lot to talk about. Issues regarding flexibility and balance that were beginning to be seen as musts for a progressive organization seem to be up for a debate all over again. For every study that says working from home increases productivity, there is a study that seems to prove that the opposite is also true. But what seems to be irking working women the most is that the ball once again is not in their court.
We caught up with entrepreneur and FlexWork evangelist Sairi Chahal and a group of men and women who use the FlexWork option to find out what they make of these developments. We began by asking Sairi if there would have been this much talk about a ban on telecommuting had it come from an alpha male leader instead of Marissa Mayer.
It is fairly true because aggressive, successful women do attract a lot of attention. Somewhere aggression, success and likability are inversely proportional for women. We still prefer women who are gentle, more, calmer in their approach, and I think it's slightly because she's where she is.
Just to add to what Sairi was saying, we are in no position to sort of debate whether it's right or wrong. According to me, it's right. Because she's sitting at a position, she has to take the flap of the board. She's seeing something that we don't know about Yahoo internally. Most women that I've seen, they have this instinctive sixth sense. So maybe it's a sixth sense which is telling her that this is perhaps not working, that people are using this to have furlough. They're not really being productive. So I think she's well within the right because she's got to face the flag. It's all about, men not being able to stomach the fact that she's taking tough decisions. That's about it.
But this was always, this was bubble for a while, especially as there's so many women all over the planet, billions, who aren't really in a process, who aren't really working for personal capital right now. And the eventual question just is, as far as employers are concerned, are you paying for time or are you paying for value? Paying for time is from the industrial age. Someone comes in, they run a machine for 5 hours, you get X output. They run a machine for 10 hours, you get X output. With people like, the people in the new economy, just making them work double the length or report for double the length isn't going to double the value they add. And that has to be the final decision that you make. How do you find talent? Do you want them to add to your company or do you just want them to show up?
Well, that's a fair point and a strongly made one as well. The vocation you are in does dictate how important your presence is in the office. And this was exactly one of the issues we thought we'd bring up with women who work in the digital media space when an event taking place in Delhi caught our eye, because it had an all-women keynote panel. And this was not just a happy coincidence at AdTech 2013, but a conscious choice on the part of the organizers. And once again, there was a Marissa Mayer Connect here as well.
Started with Sheryl Sandberg stating a comment when I was in the Valley on the stock prices, and then there was Marissa Mayer, who had just acquired a company in the US, and these two were the starting points. While I was drafting the people whom I thought need to be here, invariably all the names that I listed down are all women, and then we just looked at it and said, this seems like an idea. I think we should just have an all-women keynote, and it, and if you look at the list, naturally what it said was, women power is actually ruling the digital space across the world today.
At the event held in New Delhi, we caught up with Susan McDermott of DMG to find out what it is about the digital media space that has lent itself to creating so many women leaders.
Digital requires this flexibility and this agility and this willingness to learn, and it seems that women, equally with men, can get to the top in the industry and do more, I think, And so we really want to kind of showcase to everybody, this is a great place to be an entrepreneur, it's a great place to have a startup, it's great to work in a big brand, and we wanted to make sure some of these women who we see on our stages around the world came here to India as an example.
I think that it was a great idea because when we go to these events, it tends to be a lot of white men standing up there talking about the stuff that we've been talking about for 10 years, and it's a little bit more interesting to have somebody that is easier on the eye, like all the panels.
But on a more serious note, Aliza Altman, Vice President at Sapient Nitro, an interactive marketing and technology services agency, was glad that the issue of gender didn't actually come up at the event.
I know when we started to talk about doing this that we thought that, part of our role was to talk about how we came up through the ranks as women across a few different areas of the industry and marketing. And I think it was very refreshing for everyone to talk about their craft.
And while Bettina Sherrick of 20th Century Fox agrees with Alyssa, she went on to say that women do bring something unique to the table, and it's high time they realized it and made some noise about it too.
I asked the question and I said, you guys, I'm wondering if your success is hinged upon the way that you work versus a man. And at first everyone kind of stopped because I think they might have even been afraid to address the question. But then what came back was amazing. What came back was, yes, you're right. I saw that I needed to take the business in this direction because I listened to this. Women also don't have that necessarily that compete feeling. Like one of the sessions I went to talked about how in the youth market here in India, boys love to compete in games, whereas girls are using digital to engage and talk. And I don't think that goes away. I think those behaviors you bring those into the business world, right?
So Bettina is actually raising a very fundamental point. In fact, it's the crux of the debate. Men and women are different. Let's encourage this diversity instead of boxing working people into straitjackets. That's exactly what US Ambassador to India Nancy Powell, Aruna Jayanti, CEO of Capgemini, and Ford India's President Joginder Singh talked about at a conference on best practices for gender diversity. But that and more after the break.
To address diversity at the workplace has been a pretty recent one. Consider this question at a test for a trainee program at Merrill Lynch in 1972. Students were asked, when you meet a woman, what interests you most about her? The correct answer was beauty. Low scores were given to those who answered intelligence. Now, we've certainly come a long way from this sort of overt sexism, but have things really changed enough?
The past decade was thought to be one where women leaders would make big strides, but it hasn't quite turned out that way. Catalyst, a New York-based not-for-profit that has been working since 1962 to build inclusive workplaces, in its most recent survey found that women's share of corporate board seats at 16.6% hasn't grown at all since 2004. The percentage of female executive officers in Fortune 500 companies is even smaller at 14.3%, and it's remained flat for the last 3 years. Why has the change been so slow? We bring you answers to some of those questions and others related to what corporations are doing to create gender diverse organizations from a conference on best practices organized by Pre-Media Global and the American Chamber of Commerce in Chennai.
We talk about emerging markets from a geographical perspective. What is the biggest emerging market the world has ever seen? It's women.
Only a few years before I joined the Foreign Service, if a woman got married, she was required to resign.
The idea that life transitions are something that happen to women, wait a minute, don't men get married? Do not men have children?
If I take a flexi program that my flexi work program that my company is offering, if that's going to be viewed as a career limiting move, or it shows my manager that I don't have ambition, I'm not going to do it. It's no longer about checking off the box. It's no longer about having a set of policies and publishing it. It's really about making it work for them from a business point of view.
She could be working, she could be a homemaker, But interestingly, she is the decision maker for a lot of purchases in her household, for herself, her husband, and for her children. So the point I'm making really is diversity is a business agenda for us. It is a business priority with clear business results. But in the Bombay Stock Exchange, the number of women representatives on the board is 2.5%. And that's really our challenge today.
Our focus has been on 2-3 areas. I think one has been in terms of bringing in as much flexibility and flexible policies as we can, whether it's in terms of working from home for the roles where it's possible, or in terms of flexible working hours, you come in early, come in late, go late, or in terms of a sabbatical policy. Increasingly, I'm seeing more and more people taking it up because, initially, while there were policies, not many people were taking them up. I don't know, because there was still an apprehension that maybe a policy is there, but I don't know how my career will be impacted if I do take a break or if I, work less than other people are working, etc., etc. But as more and more senior women have taken some of these up and people have seen that they are coming back and their careers continue to grow.
We have a lot of benefits and we do a lot of good things around making our environment more inclusive, making sure we recognize differences. But what we cannot really change is the subtle feeling of being patronized as women.
I completely agree with that. And I think one of the ways of continuing to drive that is to really take swings at putting women in senior positions. If you've inherited an environment where it's all male at the top, you can't be passive about that and say, well, by the time, we'll continue to hire women and hopefully someday some of them are going to get up there. No, that's not the way it's going to work. We've recently taken a decision and put it as a target for all our leaders in, as a beginning, in your direct report leadership team. If you don't have any women, in 2013, you are going to make sure that you have a woman in your direct report leadership team. If you already have a woman in your direct report leadership team, you're going to get a second woman in your direct report leadership team. Sometimes people look at measures like this and say, why are you kind of making special, kind of a special environment for women to go up in the organization? And sometimes women also turn around and say, I don't want to be treated differently. You're absolutely right over there in mentioning that. But I think to be able to create this environment and to start creating this mindset change, you have to push a few of these things initially. And once you've got the critical mass in place, then the change actually gets ignition and gets momentum.
But while it's all good that strategies like these are being implemented and most of it is flowing from top management at these firms, Aruna Jayanti, CEO at Capgemini India, says, rather ironically, that the real benchmark for change will come when conferences like these don't need to be organized.
I think there are two levels of things that we do. One is setting the policies, setting the enablers, as I call it, within an organization. But I haven't done a session in my organization around diversity. The reason is I don't want to pull it out as something special that we need to do. I firmly believe it must be routine, day-to-day way of working. That's it. Okay? And the best thing that I can do is by setting an example and talking about an individual and not about a man or a woman. A lot of our leaders have that behavior. They're talking about who's the right person to do what, as opposed to how should I get a woman into that job. So actually we downplay that a little bit, and I believe that helps. But provided there are a whole lot of enabling policies behind that, which help really the program.
So how do you make that business case real? How do you get it from something that is sort of in your mind to something that you want to act on?
Well, I think one part of the equation is obviously having leadership make it a top priority. But I think an equal or more important piece of the equation is getting the buy-in across all levels in the organization. So if you look at flexi work programs, for example, I think it's very important to articulate why it makes sense for a manager to have the team be able to make use of these programs, and how boosts productivity, helps them retain talent longer, lowers attrition. And the trick is, I think it's also harder a lot of times to really be able to articulate it very quantitatively. There are indicators, but a lot of times it's hard to measure. It's hard to really make out a business case in an Excel sheet. And I think that's where the strategic thinking and the reinforcement of the message from leadership helps.
Is it important to measure it? How do you measure it?
Our bottom line is the measure. 50% of the world population is women. And even in what used to be referred to as male-dominated societies in India and China, our research shows that women in the household actually have a significant influence on the purchase consideration. So to me, that's the business. So for you to ask me, well, what's the ROI on women? You should also ask me, what's the ROI on tall people? And we're not going to do that. And if any of you is thinking along those lines, you're on the wrong track.
And this is something US Ambassador to India Nancy Powell made it a point to stress in her keynote address at the conference. We caught up with her on the sidelines and asked her what her 3 practical tips for working women are. Listen in.
First of all is to find some very good mentors and to find people who are good role models that you can learn from, that you can accept. To select employment where in my case, the U.S. government, but in the case of people going into private business, where there is a real commitment to this, that supervisors and others are held to high standards of ethics, they're held to high standards of employment ethics, and I think that's a very, very key piece of looking for those business opportunities and then giving back. You very quickly in an organization can turn around and help extend a hand to someone else, and I think that's extraordinarily important, particularly for women, that they turn around and do that.
On that note, it's time for us to take a break on what women really want, but on the other side, we take a look at what the corporate world can learn about how men and women tackle a job and the impact that they have on their ecosystem from a group of young girls in Hutup village in Jharkhand who've taken to football.
Lack of confidence and lack of opportunity, I think, are the 2 keys why we don't see a huge performance from young women. They don't believe they can do it, and nobody gives them the chance, and so therefore you're left with a totally underdeveloped talent pool, a massive natural resource which is not being utilized. See what kind of women you can invest in and don't look back. I think you won't regret it.
Friends Girls Love Yuva India has been working with these girls in Hutup village near Ranchi since 2008. What began as a group of 15 girls just wanting to play is today a movement of sorts. In less than a year, 13 of Yuva's girls lifted the Jharkhand state team's national ranking from the 20th place to the 4th place. 20 girls from Yuva's first team are now leading practices for 6 new teams, and 2 girls are even coaching a young boys team.
Our experiment was to look at investing in boys and look at investing in girls. And what we found was that you get a massive multiplying effect from investing in young women that you don't necessarily get from boys. 3 things that I've noticed are girls, commit. They've got a huge amount of commitment, not just to their own self-improvement, but to improving the people around them, to improving their organization. And that reinvestment, that giving back is really a key, and that's the second thing. The third thing that we've seen is that because of those first 2 things, is they've got this massive commitment, they give a lot back, there's a multiplying effect that you get with girls that you don't get with boys. Essentially, you educate a boy and you educate an individual. You educate a girl, you educate a community, and she transforms her own life and the lives of those around her. And I think that's something which is universal. A team is a team, whether it's a team in an office or a team in a rural village.
It is about taking the first leap of faith and building on that faith, giving the space to women to make their choices and not holding their decisions against them. It's all easier said than done, but maybe it's the baby steps that will eventually get us there. From all of us here at CNBC TV 18, here's wishing everybody a very happy Women's Day. We do hope that we've made a start by having an honest conversation here on what women really want, and we hope to take that forward through the year. From all of us here on the team, goodbye and many thanks for watching.